Hi, my name is Floyd, and I'm Vice President of Seventh-day Adventist Kinship International. I'd like to welcome you to this month's Kinship Worship, a program for you and by you. SDA Kinship is partnering with Colby Martin on a project to open up more discussion and be able to talk about what does it mean to be homosexual, LGBTQIA+. He's written a book called Unclobber, Rethinking Our Misuse of the Bible on Homosexuality. And at the end of this presentation, at the end of this video, I'll give you more information about how you can get your free copy of this book. For now, I'd like to thank Adventist Today for allowing us to rebroadcast Colby Martin's presentation that he did at a recent Adventist Today Sabbath seminar, where he presented the topic homosexuality. So please sit back, enjoy the following presentation, and be blessed. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. This is amazing. I am so delighted to be here. I had a whole plan for how to start this thing, but I'm just, I'm tuning into my body at the moment, which is just full of gratitude. In the beginning. Now, I've often found it to be very helpful and important and good, if not even, you might say, necessary, to start in the beginning if you ever really hope to grasp a story. If you really ever want to know what's going on, why the story matters, I think you need to start at the beginning. Anybody who's attempted in this quarantine year to watch the latest show on Netflix that your friend has said you just have to watch, you're not going to go and start at episode 5. You're going to start at episode 1. Of course you are, because you want to understand the story, where it's going, what the important parts are. In the beginning. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. Now, the ancient Jews, many, many years ago, were stuck in captivity in Babylon. And they were going through a process that we might call assimilation, where the Babylonians were attempting to assimilate the Jews to their way of life, to their culture, to their belief systems. And in that time, there were many creation stories, many ways that cultures and people would try to understand, how did all of this come to be? Where did we come from and why? And there were many creation stories. Most of them involved violence. Most of them, the idea was God, or in that day, it would have been the gods, created everything out of a great power struggle, out of death and destruction. And yet, the ancient Jews had come to believe, understand, perceive, receive that what if it wasn't that way? What if instead God created everything out of love? What if everything that is came to us, came to be, because behind it there was a benevolent being, a God who wanted to create from a place of delight and joy and compassion and kindness and mercy and goodness. And so we read the ancient Jewish story of how the world came to be, and we see that in the beginning, there was darkness and chaos, the void. And the ancient Jew says that it was into this darkness, into this chaos, into this void that God, Yahweh, the Most High God, spoke and created light, life, goodness. A very, very different story from the other cultures of the day. In the beginning, God spoke, and there was light and life and the potential for more and for goodness. Now, certainly, thousands of years later, you and I,
It is now muted.
Thousands of years later, go ahead. We read this story now, and we don't have to believe them, or we might believe them in different ways. Some of us might read this ancient story as a literal fly on the wall historical account where if you were actually standing in wherever the center of creation was, you could sort of watch all of this happen and it was a literal account. Others might read this as more of a metaphor or an allegory or a story that's attempting to name some things. But my point here is that we don't have to believe this, but what if we chose to? What if we chose to believe that this story reveals something profoundly and deeply true? I mean, what other story? We could, I guess, borrow the Babylonians' creation story and be like, yeah, everything here is because it came to be out of the gods that fought against each other and destroyed each other, and out of the bones and the chaos and the destruction of ancient beings they created. You could live that one, I guess. Or we could take a purely scientific humanistic approach and be like, this is all just neurons firing. This is all just a random chance. And again, yeah, you could, that's fine. I guess you could live that. But what if we took this story to set us on a trajectory, a way of living, where we said, what if this story is true? In ways that are deeper than just it actually happened, but are like, no, like deeper than that sort of true. So when I read this story, when I start in the beginning so that I can understand the larger story, so I can understand you, I can understand me, I can understand this world that we're in, even a little bit, which is about all I can ever understand anything. I quickly want to share just 3 quick observations that stand out to me in this story in the beginning. And the first is this: in the beginning, everything was good. When we read this story, we read how God creates stars and sun and moon, good. Trees, fish, birds, good. Buffalo, good. Armadillo, good. The naked mole rat, might have been an accident, but whatever, good. All of it, good. Then something happens. Do you remember? Do you remember how this flow of goodness comes to a screeching halt at one point in the story? There's a moment in this story where suddenly something is not good. And that moment is when, upon the advent of the first human being, Adam, suddenly he's alone. Suddenly he has no other human to connect with. And for the first time in this story, there's something not good. Loneliness, isolation, not good. Next observation is this. In this story, it turns out everything was given to humans. It is all yours, God says. I give you all of it. Enjoy. Be fruitful. Multiply. Just this place is good and it's for you. Enjoy. Take care of it. Oh. But real quick, God says. Real quick, there's actually one thing. There's one thing I'm going to ask that you maybe just let me handle. There's one thing that I'm going to ask you to maybe just stay away from. What is that one thing? Well, you remember the story, right? It is the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. Now that's interesting. I think oftentimes we remember this story and we think of it as an apple, and it's just the apple is representative of evil or sin or whatever other word we might want to use. But it wasn't the tree of good and evil. It was the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. In other words, it's the capacity, the ability to perceive what is good, what is bad, what is right, what is wrong. It's the knowledge. That's interesting. It's almost as though God said, for real, kids, I trust you with everything. It's all yours. Take it. Have a blast. It's all good. It's good, it's good, it's good, it's good, it's good. But if it's all right, the capacity to judge between what is right and wrong, good and bad, I think I need to keep that one for myself. It's not that I don't trust you with that power, but I kind of don't trust you with that power. Everything was good. Number two, judgment was kind of the one thing that God's like, I'm going to keep that one to myself. And then the third thing that I want to point out in the beginning is that when sweet Adam and sweet Eve had the opportunity presented to them to be given or to acquire the knowledge of good and evil, to be able to know the difference between good and bad and right and wrong. When the serpent was like, I get that like you're made in the image of God, but there's one thing that God has that you don't, and it's that sweet knowledge, that sweet ability to judge right, wrong, good, bad. And you can have that too. You can. And so they eat of this tree. And honestly, can we blame them? I mean, let me rephrase it. It's hard for me to blame them. It's hard for me to blame because my entire life, I have really, really, really enjoyed feeling like I know the difference between right and wrong and good and bad. I have seen myself as a very good judge. I'm not, but I think I am. I believe that I'm really good with the information of what is right and wrong. I can wield that power well. So it's hard for me to really blame them. But they eat of this fruit, and the story says that then for the first time they notice something about each other. They notice something about themselves. Y'all, they realized they were naked. They realized they were completely exposed and vulnerable. When did they notice this? Once they had the knowledge to be able to judge. They immediately turned that judgment onto themselves. Look at me. This is embarrassing. I got to cover up. This right here is not good. I got to cover up. And you should probably cover up too. That's kind of gross. Go put something on. And then God shows up and it's like, hey, kids, where'd you go? I feel like something happened here. The air has shifted a bit. The energy's a little off. Where'd you guys go? And then God sees that they're covered. And there's this line where God says to him, you guys remember this line? God says, who told you you were naked? Where did that idea come from? Who told you? Who told you there was something fundamentally wrong with you? So much so that you have to hide, that you have to cover yourself up, that you have to create some exterior artificial mask for yourself. Who told you that? It wasn't me. If you recall, I made you and I called you good. So the third thing I have to say about this story, the beginning of this story, is that shame makes us believe we are separated from God. What if we're not actually separated from God? What if it's actually impossible to be separated from the divine source of all things, the one Paul said, in whom we live and move and have our being? Friends, how do we be separated from the one in whom we live and move and have our being? This to me seems impossible. And yet, the voices in our head. No. Worse than that, the voices of the world, the voices of the outside, combine with the voices in our head to say, there's something wrong with me. I got to cover up. I'm broken. I'm damaged. I'm gross. I'm not worthy. I got to hide. Quick, give me some fig leaves. This is known as shame. Shame is this fundamental belief that you are not worthy, that you are not okay, that as you are is not good. I submit to you that in the beginning, we learned some three fundamental, deep, profound truths about everything. And it's first, that everything is good. Second, the ability, the capacity to judge, to make discernments between what is good and bad, what is right and wrong, is potentially something that we would be very, very, very slow to exercise. That maybe we're not as good at it as we think. And three, that shame, this belief that who we are, that is not good, that we have, that this is the thing that separates us from God. This is the thing that the story says that Adam and Eve were removed from the garden. And I just wonder how much of that was self-inflicted. How much of that was a perceived sense that we are separated from the divine through our own shame. Now, religion. Religion's a pretty amazing human development, in my opinion. Religion has done some incredible things for building civilizations and increasing the capacity for human technology and establishing and restoring and repairing connection between humans. Religion really is and has been an incredible development in human civilization. It's an amazing feat. And it has really mucked things up at times. Both and. Religion has been an amazing gift, an amazing tool for humans, and it has really gotten off the rails. It has really done some great harm and destruction. It's almost like religion, you might say, looks into the darkness, looks into the void, looks over the waters, into the chaos of the world, and says, we can help bring order to that. And friends, that's not a bad thing. Bringing order to chaos is not a bad thing. And at the same time, it can get out of control. And I think when we look back at the history of, I'm going to say every religion, every world religion, it is a checkered past of good moments and really bad moments. Religion is an amazing human feat, and it has a tendency to sometimes take things too far and muck things up. For instance, if you were to go back to the three observations that I had, those three things, that everything is good, that judgment is not our domain, and that shame makes us believe that we are separate. These three things are really threatening to, I think, a lot of humans. Because these three things have sort of let just run free, lead people to feel like, well, how do we control people? How do we make sure that people live together in harmony? We can't just let people believe that they're good. How do we contain and control? How do we make order out of the chaos? And religion at its best does this in benevolent and merciful and compassionate ways. Religion at its worst does it in power-hungry, manipulation, controlling ways. To take these three truths and try to tame them. And this is I would say when religion gets it wrong, it's because religion is trying to tame the fact that all things are created good. The fact that we're not separated from God, but shame convinces us that we are. And the fact that judgment is maybe something we should use less often than we do. Religion doesn't like these three. Religion doesn't like these three things. So religion attempts to tame this. And we see this throughout the Old Testament, by the way. I say by the way as though you might not have known that. I don't mean that. There are multiple hundreds of you people on here, and I don't know really any of you, and there's a very good chance that you all know as much or more that I do about the Old Testament and the Bible. So I'll just say, for me, it was a moment of revelation a number of years ago when I learned, I almost said discovered, I wasn't the one to discover it, when I learned that within the Old Testament there are sort of these competing voices, is one way to put it. This is maybe oversimplifying, but competing voices. You have the priestly tradition and you have the prophetic tradition. Now, the priestly tradition is like the aforementioned religious attempt to look into the chaos and help create some order. Again, those impulses, those intent are good, I believe, and has done really good things. But in the Old Testament, you see then the prophetic, and this is, by the way, a really fascinating thing about the Old Testament is the way in which it chronicles the history of the Jewish people in a very, very unique way, meaning it's all about self-critique. Like the Jewish people, the tribe of Israel was not really interested in sort of polishing up their history and whitewashing it and being like, look how amazing we are. Like I would argue a lot of American history books, look at all the good things, don't look over here. Whereas the Old Testament's like, we're going to show it to you all, good and bad. Yeah, this is our journey. This is who we are. This is who we've been. We're not proud of all of it. We have some good moments. We'll share those. And so you have then throughout the history of Israel, you have the prophetic tradition. You have the prophets rising up, the Isaiahs and the Jeremiahs and the Ezras and the Nehemiahs, who are rising up. Why? What is their message over and over and over again? It is the message to the priestly voices, the priestly tradition, when they have taken their religious attempts to tame the chaos, when they've taken it too far, when it is turned in on itself. You have like Malachi saying, I desire, quoting God as saying, I desire mercy and not sacrifice. Sacrifice, that was a relic, that was a ritual, that was a device created out of the priestly tribe to be like, sure, it's possible that we're not separated from God, but I sure think we're separated from God. And the only way that we can satisfy this angry, wrathful God is if we offer up some sacrifices. So here's a whole system for sacrifices so that we can not be separated from God anymore. As an example of the priestly tradition. And the prophetic tradition comes along and says, y'all, what if God desires mercy and not sacrifice? Isaiah says, what if God is like, I see all your religious festivals and I see all your sacrifices, and if I'm going to be honest with you, they're gross. Missing the point. And so you have this tension in the Old Testament between the priestly tradition of here is the way that we can sort of control people. Here's the way that we can assess who's right, who's wrong, who's in, who's out, who's good, who's bad, how you can reconnect with God in whom you are separated. And then you have the prophetic tradition, which is, yeah, but what if none of that is true? What if we've gotten it totally wrong? Jesus then comes along, and Jesus stands in the line of the tradition of the prophets. Jesus in his day looked at the religious systems, looked at you could call the priestly tribes, the priestly ways of organizing the Jewish people to figure out who's right, who's wrong, who's in, who's out, all the ways in which religion mucks it up. Jesus comes along and says, go and learn what this means. I desire mercy and not sacrifice. instantly establishes himself as being in the line of the prophets. Continues this tradition of critiquing not the outsiders, not critiquing Rome, not critiquing empire, although Jesus did have things to say to that, but primarily turned it inward and said, brothers, sisters, siblings, we've lost the plot again. We're missing the point again. Desire mercy and not sacrifice. 3 things. Everything is good. We are not as good at judging as we think we are. Maybe we shouldn't do it. And shame makes us believe that we are separated from God. Jesus joins this long tradition of the prophets, saying that Israel has lost the plot. Religion has created this system of what you can call it divine separation maintenance. It's like a divine separation maintenance program where religion continues to insist, no, you are separate from God. However, we have the key. We have the right things to do and to say. The impulse is good. The intent is oftentimes very good. But the outcome sometimes is very, very bad. And Jesus joins in this tradition. And I don't know how long it lasted. And by it, I mean the teachings of Jesus, the influence of Jesus. I don't know how long his returning Israel back to this prophetic voice, this announcing that God desires mercy, not sacrifice. That you could sum up the entire law in loving God, loving yourself, loving your neighbor. Almost as though, by the way, Jesus was like, the most important thing is love. Like, we get that, right? Everything else is secondary and or irrelevant. And I don't know how long that teaching, that message, that movement, I don't know how long it lasted, because within just a couple centuries, we see that the Emperor Constantine adopted Christianity as the state religion. And now suddenly this movement of Jesus, this religion of Christianity, had this odd bedfellow of empire. And now we have been sort of living in this post-Jesus world where the Christian religion has tamed Jesus. Where the Christian religion has, I would say, adopted the priestly tradition of creating the boundaries and the parameters and the tents and the gates to say who's in, who's out, what you have to do to be right with God, what you can't do to avoid being separated from God. Judgment. Christianity has gotten really, really good at judgment. And I say that ironically. Christianity has tamed the message of Jesus because it was wild. Wait, what? Forgive people 70 times 7 times? That's a bit much to Jesus. Instead, let's just do this 3-step program and then we'll be good. Let he who is without sin throw the first stone. Jesus, that's a bit much. You know, that means that none of us will ever get to throw a stone. So here's what I think you must have meant instead. Yeah. So we've lost the plot again. And I guess we could just feel bad about that, and we should, for all the ways that we've hurt people. And we can also be like, you know what? This is just what humans do. We have now, for a long, long time, gone in this cycle of trying to control the chaos and doing it too much to where we then hurt and exclude and oppress and discriminate. So we need the voices of the prophets, of the Jesuses, saying, I desire mercy and not sacrifice. In 2007, I was recently graduated out of college. My ministry. I was working at a church as an associate pastor of worship and arts, and I was beginning the process to become a licensed pastor in the denomination. And that denomination was the Christian Missionary Alliance. I don't know if any of you are familiar with that. But I was in the process of becoming licensed, and so I had to review their statement of belief and their policies and procedures manuals, and I had to understand how they operated and why they did what they did. And up to that point, I should say that I was born and raised in a very conservative, evangelical household that was heavily influenced by my family's Baptist heritage. So I had a very narrow idea of what the Bible was and wasn't, of who God was and wasn't, and all that. And I remember reading the policies and procedures manual for my denomination as I was getting ready for the licensing interview. And I remember coming across a line in the manual that said something to the effect of, practicing homosexuals are not allowed to be members in churches. And I remember having like this record scratch moment. Like, wait, what? First of all, the term practicing homosexuals was odd to me. Like, at what point are you no longer practicing and you're just good at it? A professional? And even what does practicing even mean in that context? Anyway, different talk, different day. But I remember for the first time having this awareness of a tension between my head and my heart. Meaning this, my head was firmly entrenched and solidified in my conservative evangelical Baptist heritage theological framework, which was, well, of course, homosexuality is a sin. The Bible's clear, homosexuality is a sin. It's not God's design for creation. So I knew that was the correct doctrinal belief, but my heart suddenly had this opening of, okay, but why can't gay people be members of churches? And then I kept reading, and they couldn't serve in particular ministries in the church. And I'm like, wait, this doesn't feel right. And it was really the first time, I think I was 24 years old. It was the first time I'd ever really stopped to consider not just the doctrine that my church held of sexuality, but the ramifications and the implications of what that doctrine meant. Fast forward a couple of years, and I did succeed in getting licensed, even though the interview was like record long time. And I'm working now at a church that was in Oregon where I was born and raised. Fast forward a few years, and now I'm working at a church in Arizona. And I have, at this point, sort of begun the process of what some of us in the religious world call the process of deconstruction, which is a fancy word that just means, I like to think of it like this. If my religious belief and world is a Jenga tower, you remember the Jenga game, the 3 blocks, and you take it out and you try to build it high and not knock it over. Deconstruction is kind of like taking out these blocks of beliefs and ideas that you have been taught growing up, and you hold it up and you inspect it, and for the first time you start asking questions of it, like, why do I believe this? Where did this come from? Does this really hold up? And we scrutinize it. And sometimes the blocks we put back on top, and we're like, you know what, I'm going to keep this one, although I'm going to put it a little bit differently. Sometimes the blocks we're like, this is where did this come from? Chuck that out. And so the deconstruction is sort of this evaluation of the Jenga tower of our beliefs. And in the year 2011, I had done a lot of work to sort of reevaluate and look and inspect what my religious beliefs were. And one of the blocks that I had pulled out at that point was to, for the first time, really investigate and explore what the Bible says and doesn't say about topics of sexuality, LGBTQ identity, same-sex relationships. I had bought hook, line, and sinker my church's teaching, which was that it's clear homosexuality is a sin. Moving on. Here's Romans 1. Here's 1 Corinthians 6:9. Sodom and Gomorrah. Duh. Moving on. For the first time, I started to explore this. And I came out on the other side of that study, that investigation, that exploration, realizing, oh my goodness, we've gotten this one wrong. The Bible doesn't provide justification to discriminate against those who identify as LGBTQ. Like, we have gotten this wrong. And of course, the church is not exempt from getting things wrong. We know this, right? For a really long time, the church used biblical justification to say that the earth is the center of the universe and everything moves around us. Because here it says in the Bible. Okay, we got that wrong. Churches and Christians and Christian leaders used the Bible to justify slavery. And then later, segregation. It says right here in the Bible. We got that so wrong. Point being, we're not exempt from getting it wrong. So just because we might not know till later on in history doesn't mean that there's no way it can be true. We've always taught it like this. We've gotten things wrong. And I learned in 2010, 2011, oh my goodness, the Bible does not say what many of us have been taught and told that it says. But I was in a context, a large evangelical megachurch. I was in a context where I couldn't talk about that. It wasn't safe to tell my other pastors. It wasn't safe to tell the people in my small group. Certainly wasn't safe to talk about it from the pulpit or talk about it in Bible studies. I just had to keep it all in here. And eventually I hit some more tension where now my head and my heart had aligned, because my heart, which was this compassionate, like, whoa, why are we treating people like this, had now been aligned with my head, which was, okay, nope, the Bible does not say what we thought it been told had been said. But then I noticed a different tension where my insides now were what I refer to as open and affirming, which is to say, affirming of those who identify LGBTQ, saying, no, you are a beloved child of God just as you are. And that was all inside, but my exterior world was now sort of in this system where I couldn't tell anybody, I couldn't talk about it. And that all came to a head in 2011 when President Obama signed the repeal for Don't Ask, Don't Tell, which was the ban against military gays and lesbians serving in the military. And I put on my Facebook page, just shared the link to an article, and I just wrote 6 words: I'm glad this day finally came. In my mind at the time, it was just, this is a discriminatory policy, so I'm glad it's no longer policy. But then the people of my church quickly were like, wait a minute, so you're saying that you are pro-homosexual now? Are you actively advancing the gay agenda? Which, side note, I still don't know what the gay agenda is. Nobody's ever let me in on that. But my Facebook feed the next morning was just filled with people from my church, just livid. And that led to an emergency board meeting 3 days later where I was forced to be in a room with a group of elders at my church. And they said, Colby, we need you to tell us what you believe about homosexuality and same-sex marriage. And so that was when I call it, that's when I came out of the theological closet, if you will. And then 2 days later after that, they fired me immediately. And that, my friends, is what ultimately led to the writing of the aforementioned book, Unclobber, which does tell a bit more of that story in detail, and then also shows about this research here, that the Bible doesn't justify, that these clobber passages, which are the 6 verses in the Bible that historically have been used to clobber gay people, to say, no, you are broken, you are damaged, you can't be who you are. And so this is the work, part of the work that I've been doing now for the last, holy smokes, decade. 2011, that was 10 years ago. These gray hairs are coming in nicely. So I'm here this morning by just saying this. Let's go back to the beginning. Let's go back to the beginning. In the beginning, everything was good except for that one thing. Remember that one thing? The one thing was, oh, it's actually not good for humans to be alone. In a world full of goodness, the one thing that's not good is when humans don't have deep, true connection. And yet religion, specifically in my tradition, the Christian religion, has decided that if a person identifies as lesbian or gay, they've decided for them, nope, you have to be alone. this this move of, you might call, forced celibacy, to me goes against the fabric of creation, because that was the one thing that was declared by God to not be good. Go back to the beginning. Number 2, judgment. Really not a thing we're good at. It might be the one thing that God was like, can you keep that one from me? And yet, we have, to our LGBTQ brothers, sisters, and siblings, we have created an intense, deadly climate of judgment. You are bad. Who you are is broken. Who you want to be with or who you love is wrong, is gross, is messed up. It's an abomination. What? No. And 3, if it's really shame that separates us, if it's this sense that we are somehow not okay, that we need to cover ourselves up in order to be okay, that we are separated from God because we are somehow too broken or too damaged, if it's shame that separates us, or shame that tells us that we're separated from God, I would invite those who are watching this now or who might watch this later, those who identify like I do as a straight person. If you've ever confronted your shame, if you've ever confronted shame in your life and tried to peel off the layers of feeling like you're not worthy, like you don't belong, I would invite you to consider how many more heavy layers has been added on to our gay brothers and sisters and siblings. Layers upon layers of shame have been given onto them, that they are somehow uniquely, especially bad. And it breaks my heart. I have a live show that I do on Wednesdays at 2 p.m. And I talk about various things, religion, spirituality, psychology. And the other day I was doing a live show talking about this idea of being worthy. My religious tradition told me that I wasn't worthy. And we don't deserve God's love. And then when I took that Jenga block out years ago and inspected it, I realized that doesn't make any sense. If God is love, then God loves us. God doesn't look at us and say, you are not worthy of my love. And so then I swung the pendulum the other way, and I'm like, spent the last 8 years saying, no, you are worthy. Like, you are worthy of God's love. You are worthy. We're all worthy. And recently I've realized that even that doesn't really make a whole lot of sense either. Because how is a person worthy of God's love? And then recently I came across a Thomas Merton. I don't know if you are familiar with Thomas Merton, but he has a passage in his book, New Seeds of Contemplation. And he had this one little line where he says, in light of the mercy of God, when it comes to God's love for us, worthiness has nothing to do with it. Worthiness loses its significance. And I started thinking about my own children. I have 4 sons, and I started thinking about, well, never would I think about them, sons, you're not worthy of my love. But nor do I really think you are worthy of my love. No, like as a parent to their child, worthiness really doesn't even come into the question. It's like, wait, I just love them because I love them, because I want to love them. I just do. And I was reflecting about this on my live show last week, and there was a gentleman who commented on there and said, you know, I'm a gay man, and for 40 years in the church, I was made to feel like I was not worthy of God's love simply because I was gay. And I realized, and I'm realizing the added, and this is just my point here for this last thing, the added layers of shame and heaviness and burden that have been put onto those who identify LGBTQ is not okay. Because we are not separated from the love of God. Nothing can separate. The psalmist says, where can I go to escape the love of God? The Apostle Paul says, neither height nor depth. Like nothing can separate you from the love of God. It can't be done. And yet religion, when it gets obsessed with control and judgment and who's in, who's right, adds these layers of shame to our gay brothers and sisters and siblings. It says you are especially and uniquely broken. Either fix yourself or be alone. And I'm not okay with that. So for those of you who are watching this right now, and maybe you yourself identify as LGBTQ, to the extent that you have had religion or religious leaders or religious systems or beliefs or ideas tell you to cover up, tell you that you are broken, that you are damaged, that you're an abomination. I know I'm just one voice, but I'm sorry. I'm sorry. You didn't deserve it, and you don't deserve it. You are beautiful. You are loved by God just as you are. Why? Because God just loves you. And for those of you who perhaps don't identify as LGBTQ, but maybe you know someone who does, friends, family members, co-workers, I invite you to consider the hold in your heart and mind, the added layers of shame and burden that have been placed upon them, and to tenderly show them that you love them just as they are. And for those among us who maybe aren't there yet, I love you. For those of us who are maybe still of the opinion that the Bible does justify discrimination, that the Bible is clear that homosexuality is a sin, I love you and I understand. I was there for a really long time. I happen to believe differently now. And it's not just because I want to, it's because I really did look into these things. But I want you to know you are a beloved child of God just as you are. And maybe, just maybe, I invite you to consider, what if you're wrong? I think it's important that we go back to the beginning, because the beginning tells us so much of what we need to know about how the story unfolds and what we should be looking for and what we should be paying attention to. And in the beginning, all things are good. In the beginning, judgment was not a thing we were invited to participate in. And in the beginning, we were good with God, and it is only our sense of shame that separates us. All right. That concludes my talk with you. I love you. Thanks for having me.
When peace like a river attended my way, when sorrows like sea billows roll, whatever, my Lord, thou hast taught me to say, it is well with my soul. It is well with my soul. It is well with my soul, It is well with my soul. It is well with my soul. And Lord, haste the day when the faith shall be sight, the clouds be rolled back, as a scroll. The trump shall resound, and the Lord shall descend. Even so, it is well with my soul. Even so, it is well with my soul. It is well, it is well with my soul, with my soul. It is well, it is well with my soul. It is well, it is well with my soul. It is well, it is well with my soul, with my soul. It is well, it is well with my soul. It is well, it is well with my soul.
Hello again. I hope you were blessed and mentally stimulated by what Colby had to present. I'd like to do a special thanks to Colby Martin for presenting that to us, and for Adventist Today for allowing us to rebroadcast it for our Kinship worship. The book, Unclobber, is highly recommended, and if you would like to get a free copy of this book, you can do so by going to sdakinship.org/unclobber and just fill out the information there, and we'll be happy to send you a free book. You can either get the paper copy, or if you're in the U.S., you can get the ebook copy. We'd be happy to send that to you, and would love to hear your thoughts about it. We're going to have several opportunities, Zoom calls, Facebook groups, things like that, where you can actually discuss your thoughts, your impressions of the book, and share with others who are reading it as well. For more information, or to get on the list for those presentations, for those discussion groups, you can either send me an email at info@sdakinship.org, or you can send it to unclobber@sdakinship.org. Thank you so much. I hope you have a blessed evening, blessed day, and remember that God loves you unconditionally. Thank you. Bye-bye.